Hello there. Have you ever wondered why the US dollar is so popular? Well, in case you do, or are now suddenly curious, you came to the right place. For a short answer, the dollar is popular and powerful because of its status as the global reserve currency. Now the longer answer follows. A global reserve currency, or a world currency, refers to any currency that countries can use to trade internationally. The global reserve currency helps to determine the value of the goods or services being exchanged internationally, making it possible for countries with different currencies, such as the yen, rupee, or euro, to transact. But how and why did the US dollar rise to this prominent position? Welcome to the channel. In this video, we explain in very simple terms why the dollar occupies the position of global reserve currency and how it got there. So sit tight and enjoy. Please consider subscribing to the channels for more analysis, commentary, and exploration of other interesting and important financial and economic topics in the most simplified way. Let us begin with a brief history of the dollar. In the colonial period, before the dollar, America relied on different currencies, including coins from different European nations. Additionally, each individual colony also printed and issued their own paper bills. The lack of a common currency meant that these currencies were often unstable and lacked uniformity, making it difficult to use for trade purposes. To address this problem, the Coinage Act of 1792 established the dollar as the official currency, based on the widely circulated Spanish silver dollar. Initially, the US dollar was backed by physical gold and silver. However, the financial demands of the Civil War led to the issuance of paper money, known as greenbacks, which were not fully backed by precious metals. While this move was controversial, it helped fund the war effort. The gold standard, where paper currency could be exchanged for gold, was officially adopted in 1879, a move that helped to provide more stability to the currency. This system remained in place until the early 1970s. So, what started as a jumble of coins ended up as the US dollar currency, backed by gold and overseen by the Federal Reserve, meaning that the gold gave the currency its inherent value. Owning the currency would mean ownership of part of the gold that backs it in the Federal Reserve. The World Wars era saw the rise of the US into a global economic superpower. This rise elevated the power and dominance of the dollar. Before the war, many countries used gold-backed money to provide stability and making exchange in international trade much easier. Gold provided the value that determined exchange rates. Therefore, whether you traded in pounds or rupees, you could easily agree on the value of each currency based on how much gold backs it. However, in 1914, the First World War broke out. During this era, major global economies are compelled to pump money into the expensive war efforts. As the war continued and governments depleted their reserves, they suspended gold-backed money for paper currencies to allow them fund the war. In 1931, for instance, Britain dropped the gold standard. Backing the money on gold meant that the country could run out of finances if the gold ran out. However, dissociating the currency from gold meant that the central banks could print more money to fund the war even with scarcity of gold. With these nations running out of money in the middle of a war, they opted to borrow more money. The US, whose currency was still gold-backed, became the choice lender for most nations. This meant that the US was giving dollars and the borrowing countries ultimately owed it a lot of gold. By the time the Second World War broke out, the US was once again a major supplier of weapons. These developments led to the US amassing the world's largest reserve of gold by the end of the Second World War, while the reserves of other countries were almost depleted. With limited gold in their reserves, these countries could not go back to the gold standard, making it impossible to back their currencies with gold, as it was in the pre-World Wars era. Something had to be done to restore order and normalcy to the global financial structure and economy. The Bretton Woods Agreement and system emerged in this period as the solution to this post-war monetary crisis. The US had emerged richer and more dominant globally from the wars. In fact, at one point, 50% of the global gross domestic product was from the US, marking its unprecedented economic superiority. With other nations finding it difficult to return to the gold standard and lacking sufficient gold to back their currencies, they turned their attention to the new American superpower. In 1944, 44 delegates from major global economies at the time met in New Hampshire at a place known as Bretton Woods. The agenda of this meeting was to develop a new financial system. The delegates adopted the Bretton Woods Agreement that significantly empowered the US dollar, making it the global reserve currency. It was agreed that instead of pegging their currencies to gold, these nations would peg their currencies to the dollar, which was still maintaining the gold standard. Essentially, since the dollar was backed by gold, the other nations would simply peg their currencies on the dollar, thereby transferring that stability and ensuring ease of exchange for international trade. The agreement also gave power to central banks for maintaining the exchange rates. Therefore, after this meeting, instead of countries acquiring and storing gold to back their money and trade internationally, they would accumulate and store dollars. Should they instead want gold, the nations would return the dollars to the US Federal Reserve and collect an equivalent amount of gold. This is the remarkable history of the dollar and how it rose to prominence as the global reserve currency. So there you have it, the long answer. The dollar is the most popular, powerful, and important currency in the world because of the initial gold backing, the world wars, and the resulting economic might of the US, as well as the depletion of gold reserves of other allied nations. We would really like to know what you think about this. Was it a wise move for the nations? Do you think it is fair? Please share your comments on the topic and video. Please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because in the next video we discuss why this status of the dollar is the biggest weapon for global domination for the US. Thank you, and keep chasing that dollar.